friends. I'm your host, Erin Port, and welcome to the Simple Purposeful Living podcast. Life can be overwhelming and busy, so once a week, I invite you to join me, and together we will make simple tweaks to uncomplicate the hard parts of our life so we can spend more time doing what we love. If you've been around here for a while, you know I love talking about tiny tweaks that make a big impact in our lives. We talk about simplifying our home, simplifying our schedules, our routines, our habits, decluttering. But one of the topics I always get a lot of positive feedback about is friendship. Anytime I talk about it, I always get lots of questions, and it seems to me that this is a common thread in all of our lives, that we need just a little bit of encouragement and practical help when it comes to this topic, friendship. The truth is, relationships need intentionality, whether that's with your kids, with your spouse, with your friends, just like anything else in our lives. And lately, friendship has been on my heart because I'm walking through a friendship shift myself. And notice in the headline, I did not say if friendships shift. I said when, because for all of us, this is going to happen at some point in our lives. If you haven't been through one recently, one is probably on the horizon or you're feeling it right now. A dear friend of mine is moving away. She's my neighbor. She lives just a couple of houses down. She's my kid's emergency contact at school. She's the gal I text when I need an egg, and she still gives me one, even though they're insanely expensive now. We've shared countless conversations. She's several years older than me, so she's been a mentor to me in parenting. We check in with each other. Those little everyday moments that make a friendship woven into the fabric of our life. That is Shelly in a nutshell. And while I know we'll still be friends when she moves away, I also know, because I've moved every 2 years growing up, that when somebody moves away, a friendship shifts and evolves. It's life. So I want you to, first of all, take this away from this podcast, that if a friendship is changing, that you are not abnormal, that is normal. And I want to talk us through then, what do we do when this happens? Because here's the thing, this just doesn't happen when a friend moves away. I was talking with a friend the other day who's going through her own friendship evolution for a different reason. Their seasons have changed. They used to be stay-at-home moms. Now that season has changed. They're going back to work. The kids are in school. And the relationship just has shifted, and we don't know what to do with it, right? We also, in the conversation that I had with my friend, discovered that there's a mourning period, not for the friend themselves, but for what there was in that relationship, right? The way things used to be, quote unquote, the rhythms, the inside jokes, the ease of connection. It's hard to watch that change, and we mourn that, right? But I've learned, I went through a friendship breakup that, looking back, I don't know that it needed to be a breakup, but here's what happened. I tried, instead of mourning the change and realizing that the friendship had evolved and the seasons had changed, I tried to hold fast, hold really tight to that relationship, make it work for a new and different season when it wasn't working anymore. And as a result, I suffocated it. It didn't end well. And friendships don't always stay the same. They just don't, and that's okay. I once heard it said, and I've held on to this belief ever since I heard it, that friendships come into our life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And that's been true for me. A couple of years ago, we joined a connection group for our church, and there was a couple in there that were considering adoption. And I knew right away that we were in their lives for a reason. We had walked through that adoption process. We could usher them through the adoption process. And while we remain friends, we were only in their lives very heavily for that reason and that season, and our friendship has evolved. Now we see them maybe once a year and Christmas cards, but it was very obvious to me that they were in they were in our life for that reason. Now, it's not always as obvious as that is for us, but just consider, even if you're driving in the car or folding laundry, are there friends that you've had that have been there for a reason? When I miscarried, I had a friend who was there for a reason. She had miscarried a year before, and she ushered me through that season. It was very obvious. And while we are like, if we saw each other today, we'd still be friends. She's not in my life anymore. Our lives have gone completely different paths. She's in a completely different town. That season is over. But it was very obvious to me that that was her purpose in my life. So friends are there for a reason, a season, and a lifetime. So, why do friendships shift? And more importantly, how do we navigate these relationships with grace and intention? Today, we're going to explore three pillars of friendships that shape our connections and make our friendships work. And if they shift, result in a shift in our relationship, and those are proximity, timing, and energy. And I first learned about these three words from Mel Robbins, so I got to give credit where credit is due, but I love them, and they basically put words to what I've always felt. So we're going to talk about those today. And then we're also going to talk about how we can nurture local and long distance relationships, because you're going to hear me say, and you've heard me said on this podcast, that anything we want to do needs to be intentional, which means with purpose. And we simplify where we can so we have more space so that we can be intentional with our relationships, like friendship. Because just like anything else in life, friendships don't just happen. We have to show up for them. So let's dive in. All right, we talked a little bit about why friendship shifts, but I also want to talk to you a little bit about when we were kids in friendship and why it's so much harder as adults. I think this is really important because sometimes we're like, why is friendship so hard? It never used to be this way. And you're correct. When we were kids, we became friends with those that we were in proximity with. And we were in proximity with them a lot because we went to school with them, we were in sports with them, we were in activities with them, we went to church with them, we were in their backyard playing until the lights came on and the sun went down. It was easy to have friends because there were a lot of them in close proximity. But when we graduated from high school, or for some of us, when we graduated from college and we all went our separate paths and we started our jobs and we were living alone, boy, friendship became more challenging, partly because the people we were in proximity with weren't necessarily in the same life stage as we are, which I'm going to talk about, that timing piece. You might be working with a coworker, which I was when I was a brand new teacher, who was 2 years from retirement. She was in a completely different life stage than me, right? And so it's a little more challenging as adults. And studies suggest that it takes up to 200 hours of meaningful interaction to develop a close friendship. Take that in, 200 hours. I did the math, and that would just take maybe a couple of weeks to a couple of months when you were in school. It would be even faster if you were, like, say, in college and your roommates, right? 200 hours. I mean, you're talking, yeah, just a couple of weeks before you have some close relationships, which is why you probably felt those bonds a lot deeper and a lot faster in that season. So, we also know that based on the longest running study on human happiness, the longest running study, it's like 70 years at this point, that one of the biggest indicators of a fulfilling and happy life is not success or wealth or even health. It's actually strong relationships. That's one of the strongest indicators. If you're happy, you most likely have strong, stable, healthy relationships. And you don't need a ton of them. That's not what the study says, but you do need them in your life for a deeply fulfilling and happy life, which I think is awesome. And it's been true in my life. And I've been the happiest when I have community and connection. So if friendships are essential to our happiness, why do they shift? So let's talk about those three pillars I've been alluding to. Number one, proximity. This is a big one. Like I said, when you were a kid, you were in proximity to all of your friends. You went to school together, you played sports together, you did activities together. Those were your people. Well, we still do that. We still look for friends in proximity. Do they live in your town? Do they run in the same circles as your kids do, right? Like you know that I invited a bunch of Solon's friends, parents, over for the reindeer games several years ago because I wanted to get to know the people that I was sitting on the sidelines of basketball and football games with and track meets with. those people that you're in proximity with, your neighbors, the people you go to church with, the people that you go to work with, those are, possibilities for friendship. And so I tell you about my friend who's now moving away. When we moved to our small town in 2020, hindsight, that wasn't a great time to move. We didn't know that when we signed the papers before everything shut down. But I was extremely lonely, as many of us were. And I remember crying and just like crying out to God, like, I need some friends. I'm so lonely. And so when the moving truck pulled up in front of the house a couple of doors down, and I saw a gal pop out of her car, I rolled down my window and introduced myself. And like I said, she became my emergency contact and everything in between. Um, because she was in proximity. It worked. But like I said, proximity doesn't last forever. So friendships will shift if your proximity changes. And like I said, that's what happened with a friend of mine, that we ended up having a breakup because I had moved. Our kids didn't go to the same schools anymore. We just didn't run in the same areas of life. Like there wasn't even a chance that we'd run into each other at the store because I went to a different grocery store now. I mean, proximity had shifted, therefore our friendship had shifted. But because I didn't recognize that, I suffocated and tried to hold on. So, is there a relationship in your life, a friendship, where maybe the proximity has changed? The other thing is timing. That's the second pillar. If that shifts, then your friendship is going to shift as well. Sometimes life seasons align perfectly. We got married and we joined this adult group, like couples group for our church. We called it a community group. And it worked great. We were all young and married. Well, then several of those couples didn't have a desire to have babies, or they weren't ready yet, and we got pregnant and our seasons shifted. So we ended up moving to another group that we were all in the same season of life. We're all having babies together. It was so fun. But then that season shifted. Our kids grew up. We went to different schools. Some of us moved away. That proximity wasn't there anymore. The timing wasn't there. So maybe you're a new mom and your best friend is still single and traveling the world. Maybe one of you is deep in the throes of caring for an elderly parent, or is in a season of career growth, or a new project, or caring for a special needs child. The time and availability you have for each other will ebb and flow, and the timing of your life will ebb and flow. You might be closer in one season, drift apart, and then come back together. We're going to talk about that later, but think about the timing. Is the timing in your life aligning? When you met, were you both stay-at-home moms and now one of you has gone back to work? Are your seasons aligning as much as they used to? If that is the case, then your friendship has probably evolved. Okay. And then the last pillar, that if it shifts, can also shift a relationship. And this one's really important to understand. It's energy. How much energy do you have to put forth into a relationship? It should be mutual, but at times, right, there's things that come up in our life and our energy shifts. I think of when we brought Quincy home by adoption and I was knee deep in helping him heal. He was going to therapy. He had 6 sessions a week. I was basically just living out of my car. I had barely enough energy to provide for my family, let alone relationships. And a lot of the relationships in that season kind of sagged because I didn't have the effort to put forth. But I was sure thankful for those friends who reached out and loved us through that season. So my question is, we kind of can tell the difference between a friend who just doesn't have a lot of energy for the friendship anymore for whatever reason. But I also want to encourage you, maybe is your friend just going through a really hard time? Maybe the season is they're just going back to work and they're overwhelmed with the season change. And while they want to be a good friend, all they have to give is survival mode at this point. And so, what energy can you put forth into that relationship to maintain it in this new season? So, the 3 pillars of friendship that will affect a relationship are proximity. Are you physically close to that person? Is it easy for you to do life with them? Number 2, timing. Are you in similar seasons of life? Do you have some things in common? And then number three, energy. How much energy do you have to put forth into the relationship? And those ebb and flow. And as a result, our friendships will shift with time. But here's the thing I want you to take away. Just because a friendship shifts doesn't mean it has to be over. And I missed this when I was younger. I missed it. And as a result, I broke up with some friends. I let go of some friendships that I really didn't need to let go of when I just needed to hold them a little more loosely. So I think of my parents. They're now both retired, and they have retired in Arizona, just an hour or two away from my dad's high school best friend. They were besties all the way through college. He was in my dad's wedding, and then life separated them. We moved every 2 years, right? So I think the extent of their communication maybe was like the occasional get together when they went back for their college reunions and Christmas cards. But then they both retired, and all it took to rekindle the relationship was a text message and, hey, do you want to get together? And now my parents and them are hanging out way more often. And so I love that idea of like, there is a season where it's tight, and then there might be a season where it's not, and then you can always rekindle the relationship. And the encouragement there is all it takes is somebody to reach out and text. And it might not even be that. My friend that's moving away, what can I do to help usher her into this new season? The proximity is not gonna be there, but can I help encourage her, put forth a little more effort in that season? So just encouragement. We don't need to panic or assume they're gone forever. Instead, we can recognize the shift, embrace the friendship for what it is in the past season, give gratitude for that, and also for what they are in this season of life. It's always good to have friends in your corner in lots of different ways, whether they're really close or more peripheral based on the season. Now, I want to share a couple of practical tweaks with you to nurture local and long distance relationships because, as I said at the forefront, in order to have friendships that shift, you have to be able to be intentional because friendship doesn't just happen, especially as adults, not the way it was as kids. So, number one, regularly check in on your friends. If you're thinking about them, text them, send them a little voice text, even. I love voice text, a simple voice text, let them hear your voice. I think it gives the nuance that written word never can. And let them know you're thinking about them. Whenever that happens to me, boy, it makes my heart so happy to see their text and to acknowledge them. And it might just be that. It might stop at that. Like, hey, I was thinking about you. I hope you're doing well. They might text back, and that might be the extent. But then if they're local, it might be, hey, do you want to meet up for coffee or lunch or dinner? Now, here is a tiny tweak that I would like to recommend to you. If you say that, I would throw out two specific dates and times for them. Here's why. Because you say, hey, I would love to get together someday. And they say, yeah, me too. And then nothing ever happens. But putting a date on the calendar ensures that it will. So that would be my tiny tweak. If you truly want to get together with somebody, throw a couple of dates out there and then you throw the ball in their court to respond. Yes, those dates work, or no, they don't. And then it's up to you. If those dates don't work for them, do you want to throw out a couple more dates or do you just want to leave it? It's up to you. But giving specific times in which you can get together is super helpful. And again, it could be a coffee. One of my favorite ways to see people is to walk because we're basically killing two birds with one stone, right? We're getting some exercise in and we're spending time with them. It's a little bit shorter, especially in a season where you might have a lot on your plate, but you get to see those friends. I think another thing that's really helpful with local relationships and being intentional is having a set date on the calendar. Laura Tremaine shared this on the podcast when she was on here, when she was talking about friendships. But having a standing date just takes the guesswork out of it. Like, I know we're going to get together maybe once a month. And we've talked about this in a friend group that I'm in. Like, we really should just put something on the calendar every month. And it hasn't happened because nobody said, let's do this time on this date and have it recurring. Somebody needs to do that. It probably should be me. I don't know. But I'm taking my own tweak advice. It's not happening because nobody has actually set a date. But I have found this to be super successful. Remember, I said we joined a connection group, a community group when we were first married of couples. Well, we're still in one and we host it at our home every Tuesday night. And those people we get to see every single week. And if somebody can't come one week, well, we know they're going to come the next week. And those people are some of our closest friends, partially because it's just on the calendar. It's a standing date and it doesn't need to be weekly. But putting something on the calendar in a season of life, and I need to get back into this. I got out of it because I was writing my book. But it used to be that on Thursdays, I tried to have a standing lunch date and I would pick somebody different to have lunch with every week. But that was my standing date for friend time. That way I knew every single week I was going to get together with somebody. And it was super helpful because it was just on my calendar. I didn't plan or schedule things during that time. Now I just try to make sure that there's friend time on the calendar every single week. It just isn't always on the same day. So this week I'm going out to lunch with my neighbors, the one that's moving, so that we can get together and catch up. But I highly recommend that tweak too, putting something on the calendar and then just making it happen. And then for long distance friendships, leverage technology. I love the app Marco Polo. So it's a video messaging app. It's free to download. We have since upgraded to the family plan, my sister, cousin, and I, but we have daily Marco Polo. And it's great, especially for people who are not in the same routine. So my sister, or same time zone. My sister lives overseas in Luxembourg. I'm here. My cousin is on the East Coast, which means we're all in different time zones. We're all, doing different things. Ellen's got the twins to take care of. My cousin and I are both working, those sorts of things. So we can video a message. I usually do it when I'm walking, and I also listen when I'm walking because, again, killing two birds with one stone, pairing something I love to do with something I need to do. That's a whole nother podcast episode. But and then I just get to message and keep in contact with them, and I love it. If you're not keen on the video message, another one that's great is Voxer, Voxer. I'm not sponsored by either of these items, but it's a voice text, and my writing coach and my assistant and I both have used this, and it's great because they can voice text you a message and you can voice text back. You can also respond via text message on there as well. And if you just want to keep it really simple, you can use iMessage or your phone's voice messaging system to send a voice text as well. I will say they do delete after somebody listens to them the first time unless you push the little keep icon underneath the voice text. So if you want something to be only listened to once, great. Don't push the keep. But if you feel like, you want them to be able to listen to it more than once, you can go ahead and click that keep button. But that has been super helpful in keeping friends, even local friends who I'm no longer in proximity to, and I connected. So I have a friend who she and I used to go to the same church. We were in the same connection group. She no longer goes to our church. We're no longer obviously in connection group anymore. Literally, I would never see her unless I had Marco Polo, except for the occasional dinner time. But we want to stay connected. And so Marco Polo's great for that. And then the last thing I would say that I got caught up in myself, if you've ever noticed, Simple Purposeful Living is oftentimes I take my mess and I make it my message. But I always assume the best. We can oftentimes assume the worst. So, point in case, last week I sent a Marco Polo to someone. We were trying to solidify some plans, and I saw that they had seen it, they'd watched it. Okay, the read message, man, right? We can assume the worst. Like they've read it. What I've said has offended them. They're angry, whatever. Like that happens to me all the time. I always assume the worst. Well, here is where it bites me in the bottom because she finally got back to me. She Marco Polo'd me back and she said, "Hey, I just wanted to make sure. I needed to check with some other people to make sure that those plans worked before I got back to you." And I was like, awesome. I assumed the worst when really she just needed a little time to get everything in order. So always another good indicator to always assume the best. Everybody's lives are busy. Nobody's trying to offend you. Our friendships will ebb and flow, but assume the best. It just is it's a better outcome than assuming the worst, right? And then never be afraid to rekindle old friendships or seek healing in previous friendships. I will say the friend where I tried to suffocate and make it work in a season that was no longer working, I was trying to make a friendship that was very close in a previous season work in a different. And we ended up it didn't end well. But I was able to go back a couple of years later with some insight and wisdom from time. Sometimes time can bring. And I was able to just message a voice message and say, hey, I'm sorry for my role in all of this. Like, I was trying to make something, a friendship work in a different season. Like, our kids didn't go to school together anymore. Anyway, I was able to apologize and bring some healing. And that was really, really good because on the occasion that we do see each other now, there's no ill will. It just, it's better. So I'd encourage you, if that's something that you're struggling with, to go back and find some healing and resolution. And it doesn't mean that, again, you're going to hop right back into a relationship, but there is some peace and comfort that comes from apologizing and forgiveness. So anyway, your tweak of the week. Here's what I want you to think about today is friendships do shift. You're not weird. You're not abnormal. Life changes. And with that means our relationships and our friendships are going to change too, whether that's through proximity, we're not close anymore, whether that's because somebody took on a new job or somebody moved. Maybe our seasons have changed. You're in the throes of motherhood and your friend is still single. Or maybe it's energy. You just don't have as much to give anymore, or either does your friend, or whatever it is. But if one of those three pillars shifts or changes, your relationship will be affected. And it's just important to recognize that so that you can be intentional with your relationships in the season that you're in now, grieving what was, because that's normal, but not trying to shoehorn a relationship into a season that no longer fits. So your challenge, your tweak of the week, I haven't done this in a couple of weeks, is this. Take one tiny tweak and apply it, whether that's messaging a friend that you need to apologize to. Maybe that's rekindling a relationship like my parents and texting a friend you haven't seen in a while and just checking in. Or maybe it's putting a standing date on the calendar with a friend that you just really want to connect with and be intentional for. Lots of options here, but remember, the most happy and fulfilling people have strong connections in their lives, those relationships that matter. And the only way that that happens is with purposeful living. So take that with you today. I will see you next week, and I hope you have a little fun time with a friend. If you liked this episode, it would mean so much if you'd share it with a friend or leave a quick rating and review so others can find our show. Until next time, you can find me at Simple Purposeful Living on Instagram and Facebook.